Doing a word study in the Bible requires some knowledge of the basics of ancient languages used to write the Bible, some understandings of basic principles of translation, and some skill in utilizing resources available to the Bible student. In today's training module, we will look at some of these aspects. We will first look at the ancient languages used to write the Bible. If we're to do a word study, it is important that we have a basic understanding of the three ancient languages used in writing the Bible and where they appear in the Bible. It is important that we know which language is represented by the particular word that we're studying based on the particular passage we're viewing. We will know this by understanding where each ancient language is found in the Bible. The Old Testament was written in two related ancient languages. These two languages were Hebrew and Aramaic. Hebrew was utilized for most of the Old Testament, while Aramaic was utilized for about 200 of the total verses of the Old Testament. The Hebrew alphabet is a Semitic form of writing which first appears in about the 10th century BC. Semitic languages developed around the area of Palestine and included several ancient dialects such as Arabic, Canaanite, Phoenician, Sumerian, and others centered around the Fertile Crescent. The written form was borrowed from the Phoenicians. The Paleo-Hebrew alphabet was utilized until about the 5th century BC, at which time it was supplanted by the more modern Hebrew alphabet. Unlike the English alphabet, which is largely based on the Greek alphabet, the Hebrew alphabet contains no vowels. It is written right to left, and vowels are indicated by small vowel points written above and below the letters. These vowel points first came into use in about the 5th century BC. Prior to that, Hebrew writing was purely consonantal. By the 5th century BC, the Hebrew alphabet had morphed into a very similar form of writing to modern Hebrew. The Hebrew language is the language of the senses. As such, it is a very concrete language. Hebrew is characterized as a poetic language. Sentences are very short and are linked with the word and. Since it is a poetic language, words often have a literal as well as a figurative meaning. Proper names in the Hebrew also have literal as well as figurative meanings, which often become a part of the poetic nature of the text. In doing a Hebrew word study, there are several things to look for. Number one, names have meaning. An example would be the name Bethlehem, where the prefix Beth means house of, and Lehem in Hebrew means bread. Bethlehem therefore means house of bread. Number two, words often have literal as well as figurative meanings. An example is the Hebrew word kavah, translated as weight in Isaiah 40:31. Kavah carries the idea of winding together, much like a rope is wound together from many strands and gains its strength from the individual strands acting together as one. Thus, although the word conveys the idea of patience, the stronger or poetic idea is one of interweaving oneself with God by building a relationship with Him and drawing strength from that relationship. Number three, there are usually some significant poetic aspects to the Hebrew as well. An illustration of the poetic nature of the Hebrew is found in the book of Micah, chapter number 1, verses 10 through 16. The name of each town mentioned here has a literal meaning that is used to pronounce judgment. Some of the illustrations used by Micah are Ephra, which means dust town. Micah says that dust town shall roll in dust. And Saphir means fair or beautiful town or well-dressed. Micah says that fair town shall be ashamed and naked. Achib means lie town. Micah says that lie town shall literally tell a lie. A second language used in writing the Bible was the Aramaic language. The Aramaic language found its way into the Old Testament as a result of the Babylonian conquest of Judah in 586 BC. Aramaic is closely related to Hebrew in that both ancient forms of writing derive from the Phoenician written language. In 586 BC, King Nebuchadnezzar II of Babylon had laid siege to Jerusalem and destroyed the city. He led the remaining Jewish survivors into captivity, scattering the Jews throughout the Babylonian Empire. The result was that the Jews slowly lost the ability to write and to speak Hebrew. Instead, they adopted the Aramaic language and the Aramaic form of writing. During this transitional period, several portions of books of the Bible, most notably portions of Jeremiah, Daniel, and Ezra, were written in Aramaic. The Old Testament writers utilized Aramaic for only about 200 verses, and these are Genesis chapter 31, verse 47, where the name Jegar Sahadutha, mound of witness, is Aramaic. Jeremiah chapter 10, verse 11, Daniel chapter 2, verse 4, the last half of the verse, to chapter 7, verse 18, Ezra chapter 4, verse 8, through chapter 6, verse 18, Ezra chapter 7, verse 12, through chapter 7, verse 26. A third language found in the Bible is the first century Hellenistic or Koine Greek. The New Testament was written entirely in this Greek language. The Greek language had distinctly separate origins from the Hebrew and Aramaic. Whereas the Hebrew and Aramaic languages were Semitic in origin, the Greek was Indo-European in origin. The Greek language originally consisted of several dialects and variations in alphabet, but following the conquest of the Greek Peloponnesus by Alexander the Great in the 4th century BC, a single Greek dialect and alphabet arose. And this form of Greek is known as Classical Greek. This form of Greek later evolved into the 1st century Hellenistic Greek, also referred to as the Koine Greek. The Hellenistic Greek was the dialect used to write the New Testament. The Greek language of the 1st century is considered to be the most expressive language ever to exist. The Greek language utilizes verb forms and grammatical constructions that produce literal word pictures of expression, unmatched by any other written form of expression. The Greek language is more abstract in that the Greek language is the language of the mind. Abstract thought is the expression of concepts and ideas in ways that cannot be seen, touched, smelled, tasted, or heard. The distinctive grammatical aspects of the Greek language are quite complex, and they are outside the focus of this training module. So how do we do a word study? First, we have to establish some rules that will guide us in doing a word study. Rule number 1. Words found in each language have separate and distinct readings. What this means is that ancient Hebrew words do not have the same nuance of meaning as ancient Greek words. This means that the same English word used to translate a Greek word in the New Testament and a Hebrew word in the Old Testament does not necessarily mean that the Greek and the Hebrew words mean the same thing. This is because Hebrew words may not have the same nuance of meaning as a Greek word does, and vice versa. As stated earlier, Hebrew is a concrete language while Greek is abstract. The way in which they convey ideas are quite different. For example, the Greeks would describe a pencil as being yellow and about 8 inches long, while the Hebrew would describe it as based on its function, akin to, I write with it. Thus, verbs predominate the Hebrew language while adjectives and participles predominate the Greek language. As a result, tracing an English word of the Old Testament into the New Testament will not yield the true meaning conveyed in each. The illustration is the Hebrew word emunah, translated as faith in Habakkuk 2 and verse number 4. This word conveys more the idea of steadfastness than it does intellectual assent. This word is used in Exodus 17. It's used in reference to Moses holding up his hands until evening, while his hands were steadfast. On the other hand, the Greek word pistis is used in Romans 1:17 and is also translated as faith, and it conveys the idea of intellectual assent to the facts. That is, believing who Jesus is and what he is. Thus, though these two words may overlap, the meanings are different because the Hebrew is concrete, it is steadfast, and the Greek is abstract, that is, intellectual assent. Rule number 2. There are occasions in our English Bible where a single English word is used to translate several Greek or Hebrew words. This does not mean that various Greek words or various Hebrew words all have the same meaning. For example, there are several Greek words used in our Bible to translate the word love. Each of the Greek words convey a separate and distinct aspect of love. An example is Matthew 28, verses 19 and 20. Here we have a single word, teach, is used to translate two separate Greek words. The first word is mathetuo, which means literally to make disciples, while the second word is didasko, meaning to instruct. Rule number 3. There are occasions in our English Bible where several English words are used to translate one Hebrew or Greek word. This does not mean that the Greek or Hebrew words in questions have a multiplicity of meanings. Rather, this is simply an English convention to add variety to the written translation. The original nuance of meaning of each word must be explored. An example is John 21:15 and 1 Corinthians 13:1, where the word translated as love in John 21:15 is the same word translated charity in 1 Corinthians 13:1. Rule number 4. Word studies alone will not convey the entirety of the meaning of a verse or passage in the Bible. The Greek grammarian A.T. Robertson stated in his landmark book, A Greek Grammar in the Light of Historical Research, that the order of importance in interpreting a passage in the Bible is that grammar supersedes history, and history supersedes doctrine. In his view, the grammar of the original biblical languages was the most important element in interpreting the passage. Let's look at some resources for doing word studies. There are a number of resources one can use for a word study. These include both written and digital resources. Here are some of the examples that I personally use. One resource is Strong's Exhaustive Concordance. Strong's Concordance was compiled by Dr. James Strong in 1890. The original concordance listed most of the English words found in the 1769 authorized version, although there are now Strong's Concordances for the various modern translations as well. Each English word found in the Bible is keyed to a number. The number represents the corresponding Hebrew or Aramaic word, if it was Old Testament, or a Greek word if it was New Testament, that was translated using the English word. Using a Strong's Concordance is quite simple. You simply look up an English word and determine if it is Old Testament or New Testament. To the right of the word will be found a number. As an example, if we were to look up the word Galilee in Strong's, it would be listed alphabetically under G, and we would find a list of every place this word occurs in the authorized version. As can be seen in our illustration, there are only 5 listings where this word occurs in the Old Testament. All 5 of them are listed as number 1551. We will find 1551 listed in numerical order in the Hebrew dictionary in the back of the concordance. Make sure that when you use the concordance, you look in the Hebrew dictionary where the English words are found in the Old Testament, and in the Greek dictionary where the English words are found in the New Testament. As we look in the Hebrew dictionary, we find that the Hebrew words are listed numerically. When we look up number 1551, we find that it is the Hebrew word Galilea. We also see that Strong's notes that it has the same meaning as word 1550. When we look at 1550, we see that it means in the Hebrew circular, in reference to the fact that it originally was an upland plain nestled in the northern mountains of Palestine. Another resource is W.E. Vine's Complete Expository Dictionary of Old and New Testament Words. This was written by William Edry Vine in 1940. It is divided up into 2 sections, those being the Old Testament and the New Testament. All English words are listed alphabetically. If we were to look up the word humbled from the Old Testament in the Old Testament section of Vine's, we see a complete exposition of the word, which lists the number of uses, grammatical aspects, and the etymology or the development of the word. A third resource we can use is an interlinear Bible. One of my favorites is an interlinear Greek New Testament compiled by Dr. Spiros Zodhiates. It presents in this case the Greek New Testament based on Hodges and Farstad's majority Greek text. The following line is a literal word-for-word translation. In the margin is the translation text. And for those who wish to go deeper into word studies, resources such as Joseph Thayer's Greek Lexicon of the New Testament can be utilized. Joseph Thayer published his landmark lexicon in 1886, and it is still widely published today. It alphabetically lists, based on the Greek alphabetical order, most of the Greek words used in the New Testament. As an example, what if we wish to look up the Greek word logos, which is translated as word in John 1:1? If the user can read Greek words, he can look up the word logos, and there he will find a complete lexicological treatise on the word logos, including ancient usage by various Greek writers, biblical usage, development of the word, etc. Modern editions of Thayer's include Strong's reference number in the margin next to each listed word. This allows you to utilize Strong's dictionary in concert with Thayer's. All of these resources are available in digital format today as well. Programs such as Logos, Bible Tree, and QuickVerse are available today, which also includes a digital reference such as interlinear Bible programs, reference materials, concordances, and study libraries. One place that you can go to obtain a free digital reference library is blueletterbible.com. Another resource that I utilize is on my smartphone is Logos. This allows me quick reference to an entire library. It includes several Greek New Testaments, as well as concordances and commentaries. A great feature is that it allows me to highlight a Greek word in the Greek New Testament application, and then it will present a concise meaning of the word, as well as the grammatical elements. Any and all of these resources are available in various Bible bookstores or can be purchased online. A good reference library is a must for the serious Bible student. And if you have any questions on how to use these resources, please see Keith Wells or myself. We will be glad to spend time with you, helping you to develop the ability to effectively use these resources in your ministry. We hope you enjoyed this module of how to do a word study. It is our prayer that the information presented in this module will help you to grow in your understanding of the Bible. May God bless you as you explore the depths and riches of His Word.